It's that time again, episode 101 of Midweek News for November 13th, 2024. Let's get started. Atari acquires Transport Tycoon. This is an interesting development and perhaps a sign that Atari is on its way to rebuilding itself to its former glory. Keep in mind that for open source purists, OpenTTD is still available and based on Transport Tycoon Deluxe. Windows infected with backdoored Linux VMs in new phishing attacks. A new phishing campaign dubbed Cron Pound Trap infects Windows with a Linux VM that contains a built-in backdoor to give stealthy access to corporate networks. The phishing email pretends to be a One America survey with a large attached zip file. The zip file contains a Windows shortcut named oneamericasurvey.lnk and a data folder that contains the QEMU virtual machine application. QEMU is a legitimate tool and is also digitally signed, so Windows does not immediately raise alarms about it running. Windows security tools cannot scrutinize what malicious programs are running inside the VM. There is, of course, more to the story, which you can find in the article. If there is one takeaway, this seems to be a case study in why Windows administrators will want to have some familiarity with Linux. Filezilla Client 3.68.1 has been released. This version fixes a build issue in the macOS version and updates translations. PartEdMagic 2024.11.03 has been released. In this version, it updates the kernel, introduces Wine 9.x series, updates LibreOffice and Clam AV. PartEdMagic is a handy tool that does operate on a subscription basis, but I can say from experience that it has been a very handy tool to have around. FFmpeg devs boast up to 94x performance boost. After adding some handwritten assembly code for AVX 512, there has been up to a 94 times speed boost. It is unsurprising that adding assembly language components would add this kind of speed up, but it does make me wonder if there will be a different amount of benefit across different operating systems and CPU architectures. macOS 15.2 will let users add a weather widget to the menu bar. Yes, widgets come in and out of favor. How useful the weather widget will be remains to be seen. I've survived this long without it. macOS 15.2 is scheduled to be released in December. Understanding Bash command syntax. While it doesn't enjoy the usage it once did, with many users following the Apple lead of adopting ZSH, understanding Bash command syntax is still useful. If you can grok Bash syntax, you will likely be able to move fluidly between Bash and ZSH if you can identify the minor differences between the two shells. This article is a handy reference and has some great examples that can be worked through quickly or built upon for more elaborate solutions. LXQt desktop release with experimental Wayland support. This release has many updates to PCman FFmpeg, the file manager, LXQt panel, QTerminal, LXQt session, and configuration center components. The highlight is the experimental Wayland session through a component called LXQt Wayland session. 7 Wayland compositors are supported, including LabWC, Kwin, Wayfire, Hyperland, Sway, River, and Neri. It will be interesting to start playing with LXQt as it gets incorporated into future Linux distributions. Redox OS is now running on RISC-V. Redox is a microkernel-based OS written in Rust. Redox OS aspires to be an alternative to Linux and BSD. The Cosmic Store has been ported to Redox, allowing users to browse and install packages. Redox is still a work in progress, but it does feel exciting, like the early days of Linux before it was a more widely known name. Bitwarden adopts GPL3 for its SDK after FOSS drama. I continue to be impressed with Bitwarden. Although I'm not a developer, having the SDK under the GPL3 is reassuring going forward. Under the previous licensing model, if you remove the internal SDK, it was no longer possible to build the publicly available source without errors. I've used Bitwarden since I switched away from my last password manager, which I shall not name directly. Haha. Statistical analysis tools for Linux. Some apps you may want to check out are RStudio, Root, PSPP, Sofa Statistics, and JASP. I've never really got past using spreadsheets for rudimentary analysis, but some of these tools may prove interesting for analysis of YouTube stats. I just have to reformat the data to make it useful. Vampire Hunters turns Vampire Survivors into a first-person shooter where you stack 14 weapons together. It's no secret I'm a big fan of Vampire Survivors. Vampire Hunters is something I will at least investigate further, although I've never been a huge fan of first-person shooter type games. Maybe I'm just showing my age. I may be old, but at least I got to see Black Sabbath on stage twice. Sysadmins have encountered an automatic upgrade from Windows Server 22 to Windows Server 2025. This has created a problem for some organizations. The issue has been traced to the Windows Update API. Microsoft had mistakenly labeled Windows Server 2025 upgrade as KB50448284. If you're using a patch management utility, you may want to flag this update until the issue has been resolved. SCP Directory Transfer. How to do it. Good old secure copy. It's not just for Linux and other Unix-like systems anymore. Although this article is written in a Linux-centric way, you can in fact use this on a Windows 10 or 11 machine, which both have the SSH suite of tools built in. Kdenlive 24.08.3 is now available. This is the last maintenance release in the 24.08 series. As such, there are mostly bug fixes going into this version. Microsoft confirms OpenSSH issues in Windows 11 23H2. It seems that KB50448380 is breaking OpenSSH and preventing SSH connections. There is a workaround for this issue listed in the article. The bug does not appear to impact systems running 24H2, but that version is a dumpster fire all on its own. More ways to share files in Windows 11. There will be new ways to share files coming to the continually evolving Windows 11. You will be able to share a local file from the recommended section of the Start menu by right-clicking the file and clicking Share. Microsoft is also testing something called Share Entry Points, where you will be able to quickly share recently accessed files from the taskbar and Start menu jump lists. This is getting interesting. Of course, it will only be useful in a Microsoft-only environment so far as I can tell from the limited details available. Debian 12.8 released with 68 bug fixes and 50 security updates. All existing Debian 12 users should update their systems. It continues to be powered by the 6.1 LTS kernel series, just moving to a newer version in that series. The fresh ISO images are always a welcome announcement as they save time for new deployments. Testing network speed on Linux with iperf3. This tutorial covers how to set up iperf3 client-server environment, various testing methods, and how to interpret the results. Much of what is covered here will also apply to macOS with the exception of the install method. Keep in mind that iperf3 is a Unix-centric utility and is not the best way to test network speed on a Windows machine or a Windows network. On a Windows network, you can fall back to using iperf2 or use a Windows-centric tool. Microsoft is investigating a OneDrive issue causing macOS app freezes. Microsoft has acknowledged that an issue causing macOS applications to hang when opening or saving files in OneDrive. This issue only impacts macOS Sequoia systems. Until a fix is available, Microsoft is suggesting users force quit the Open and Save panel service process. An outside-the-box solution could also be to use rclone and bypass the official OneDrive application completely, but I'm not a typical user, nor do I use OneDrive for anything other than testing purposes. Your mileage may vary. And that, my friends, will bring us to the end of Midweek News Episode 101. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see some of you in tonight's live stream at 9 p.m. Have a great day.